Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Babbling Irons video. This time joined by a very special guest, Gio from Hammers Chat, which I'm sure you're all aware of already. Yeah, Gio, massively appreciate you coming onto the channel. I know Steve's been over on your side doing some analysis and stuff. So, yeah, good to have you over here on Babbling. And yeah, just want to get your thoughts on West Ham so far. You know, we're up a week away from the transfer window ending now, going into that second half of the season, or already into the second half of the season. There's still a lot to play for, still a lot of good things happening at the club, despite the, I don't want to say negative attitude among the fan base, but you know, there's definitely been some negative connotations toward David Moyes, which we'll get onto shortly. But just as West Ham, as you know, as a fan right now, you know, aside from Hammers Chat, babbling, etc., all the analysis, just as a fan, you know, a regular person going to the matches, watching these football matches unfold, and how we've done over the last few years and into this season, what is your kind of overall thoughts on just the whole club? You know, the structure, the hierarchy, how we're performing, the performances, the football we're playing, just everything.
I'm quite impressed actually as a package. I'm quite impressed. It's when you start to break it down into the subtopics where you can be really happy with some things and disappointed in other things. But overall, I'm maybe 7 out of 10. I'm very happy in that regards because I was just speaking to someone the other day. And we were talking about when we moved to the London Stadium, and there was a bit of optimism because of the last season up to Park. But the first few years at the London Stadium was pretty grim. When the cups come round, they were getting binned off essentially. It was almost a distraction because we're in a relegation battle, and it was considered a success if we weren't in a relegation battle. It was like, well, this is a good season, and even
Yeah.
if that's just finishing 10th, that was considered a success. When you look at where we've got to now, which is, you know, we're competing for European spots in the league again, whether we can get it or not is a different conversation. But I think the standards at the club have risen a lot over the last few seasons, and I think that's an incredibly impressive thing and a very difficult thing to do. When we moved to London Stadium, the term next level was banded about by the club, not by the fan base. And this is important. It was the club that said next level. So they were the ones saying, we're going to deliver this. So we were right to turn around and say, well, go on then. This is the expectation. This is why you've moved us. You must deliver this now. And the big question was, and this is where it starts to come down to your own opinion, which is, well, what was next level for West Ham? And I've always said competing for trophies and having a chance of European football, that would be next level to me. And doing that consistently rather than just one season, because we'd seen it up to Park, we'd have a season of qualifying for European football, but it would disappear again for a few seasons, and you could go down to the Championship and come back before you did it again. But now it's, you know, to have European football 3 seasons in a row, potentially a 4th season, we've won a trophy. We're at the next level now. So the question is, can we go to the next one? I'm not sure we can. I think a lot of things would need to happen in order for that to happen. But some of those things are already occurring in regards to sort of like Tim Steidten, what he's trying to do. That is next level. It's
Yeah.
just, can we also get all the other bits right in order to take that step up? That remains to be seen. But in regards to this season, Frankie, yeah, I'm pretty happy as overall. But like I said, if you break it down, there's some bits I'm not too happy about.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You know, with the stadium move, when it was forecasted to us, it was like, we're going to build a world class team in a world class stadium. You know, all these quotes from Karen Brady selling the product of the stadium, which all the fans bought into. Well, technically bought into with what happened. You know, the pictures we were shown were different to what was presented. You know, there's a lot that's happened in that time. Like you mentioned, avoiding relegation in his first few years at the London Stadium, that was just paramount. That was just the goal and the standard for this football club, and it has been for a long time. You know, it's not like we've been competing massively in the Premier League before that, even at Upton Park. So this was kind of the shift in culture, the shift in West Ham's future, and it didn't happen. We tried it with Pellegrini. We spent a lot of money under Pellegrini as well. You know, 100 million in that summer transfer window. You know, we bought in some big name players, and then when it got some, you know, Brazilian talent like Felipe Anderson, it was all the the makings of what they were trying to do. And in fact, I remember that summer so clearly. Every West Ham fan I spoke to was so happy with that summer transfer window and how we were approaching it, and bringing in Pellegrini to replace David Moyes the first time around, and it just didn't happen. And like you mentioned with the London Stadium, it's definitely become a place where if you look at our home record under David Moyes in the past couple seasons, fantastic. I think it might have been last season or the season before. We only failed to score in one home game, which is just outstanding record. And we've been performing consistently now for the last 3 or 4 seasons. Yes, last year we didn't do well in the Premier League, but we won a European trophy. And like you were saying there, when it comes back to success, what is success for a West Ham fan? I think if you asked anyone when we were moving to the London Stadium, or even a few years ago when we were battling relegation, it would have been competing at the top for a European position and maybe trying to win a trophy. I never thought I'd see West Ham win a European trophy. People kind of discredit it for what it is, but you still have to go through that tournament and perform away in Europe, time and time again. And not only that, we went unbeaten. And beat a very, very good Fiorentina side in the final, who are doing very well this season in Serie A. So yeah, to continue that as well after what's happened this summer with Declan Rice. Obviously, we've spent that money and reinvested it pretty well across the board, which has massively helped. And yeah, so I guess we now go into the second half of the season. We're 6th in the Premier League. We're into the knockout stages of Europa League once again. What is considered success to you now, Gio? Because we've got ourselves into a position where we're fighting on both fronts here. We're looking to bring in the likes of Phillips, the young talents of Osman, etc. So it looks like we're trying to make some moves in January to strengthen, to try and compete again in the second half of the season. What is going to be success for you?
Qualifying for European football, whether that's via the league or via winning the Europa League. I think one of those two things would be what is success. I think if we were to finish 9th and not win the trophy, then I would suggest it's been an unsuccessful second half of the season, because the fact of the matter is, and this is where you can sometimes be sort of the victim of your own success a little bit. So the club so far have positioned us 6th in the league. So it's like, well, you now have to maintain that. And even if you drop a couple of places, it might be okay, but that's what you've got to achieve. You've got to get European football for next season, and it'll be difficult. It's not going to be easy, but that would be what I would determine success, Frankie.
Yeah, no, I think I completely agree. If you look at 6th to like 11th, where Wolves are right now, is like 6-7 points max in it. So in a couple of weeks' time, we could be sitting in a very different position, and suddenly our outlook's changing. But yeah, I think because we've got ourselves into the position we are currently in, it's now about getting European football. And like we were mentioning off air, it could be the top 8 places that get European football. So there's definitely a very, very good chance of doing it again. And for me, if it's gonna, I don't want to say give us the platform to continue, even if it's, your opinion on David Moyes we'll get to in a minute. But next summer, you've got Lucas Paqueta, you've got Mo Kudus, you've got some fantastic footballers at this football club, even Alvarez, Emerson, I'm seeing linked with moves away to Italy. These players are going to want European football. And that is a massive factor into signing them in the first place, regardless of, what you think. And, I saw a tweet earlier, people mock the Conference League win, but it got us European football, and it allowed us to continue to attract the players we did under Tim Steidten this summer. So there's a massive incentive for us to keep going this year and get European football again. What about the Europa League? Because that's like you mentioned there, you'd rather, if we win Europa League or finish in top 8, it doesn't matter how we get European football. But what do you put our chances down to in the Europa League this season? Because there's some good teams in it. Bayer Leverkusen are firing. You've got Liverpool, Brighton, etc. Is this a step too far in your eyes this year
No.
with the teams, or do you think we can go all the way?
Yeah, I think we can go all the way. You need luck. Best case scenario for West Ham, Leverkusen draw Liverpool in the next round. Hey, hello, one of them are out. You need a little bit of joy when it comes to the cup draws, but my mentality has changed a lot not because of the Conference League run, because those opponents weren't really difficult, but because of the previous Europa League run, where obviously we got eliminated, but en route we beat Sevilla and we beat Lyon. And because of that, it's given me confidence that actually, bar 1 or 2 teams in this competition, we can beat them. Whoever it is, we can beat them. Leverkusen's the team I would bet on going and winning it at this point, but there could become a situation where they might have to focus on winning the Bundesliga. They might have to think, hang on a minute, this Europa League's not our priority currently because we've got bigger fish to fry here. We can win the title. Worst case scenario, we qualify for the Champions League next season. So it'll be interesting as to how they approach it. You know, Boniface is injured for a few months now, so they're missing the main man up front. I mean, Patrick Schick is hardly a poor player to come in. They've just signed someone from La Liga as well to replace him for now. But there might come a point where Xabi Alonso has a bit of a conundrum on his hands. But regardless, I'm hoping for a bit of luck in the draw. If we get it, then we can go on and win this tournament. If we get Liverpool in the next round, somehow we get through that and get Leverkusen next round, then we probably will go out. But, you know, nobody remembers the run. Whenever, if I was to say to you who won the Champions League last season and you came back with the answer and I would say, who did they play the quarterfinal? You probably won't know because you don't care. It doesn't matter how you get there. It's getting there. So I want the easiest run possible to the final, Frankie. I want Leverkusen out. I want Liverpool out. These sort of glamorized. When we were first in the Europa League, I wanted Barcelona. I said, yes, please, I'll have that. Yeah. I don't want that anymore. I don't want the glamorized anymore because back then, it was almost like a little bit of novelty that we were in the Europa League. It was like, let's just enjoy it while we can. I had that feeling. I don't have that feeling anymore because we're one of the heavyweights. Other clubs would be thinking, I don't want West Ham. Look at them, 6th in the Premier League, won the Conference League. Paqueta, Kudus, but I don't want them. I do not want to play West Ham. We are now one of the heavyweights in this tournament, and that's got my hopes up and it's got my expectations up. And as a result of that, I don't want the glamour ties. I want the easy ones. And yeah, we can we win it? Yes. Will we? At this point, I'll say no.
Yeah.
But until that draw's done, it's difficult to say.
Yeah, exactly. It's so interesting. You know, I remember when we could have had Barcelona in that semi-final, and it actually ended up being Frankfurt who knocked us out. And I remember just thinking, you know, I really want Barcelona. You know, what a tie that would have been if we got them. But now I'm, you know, exactly the same as you. Give me the easiest route to that final you can possibly give us, because you're not going to remember the kind of journey there unless you're the, you know, the supporter of the club. And you know, winning that final in Prague was just, you know, you're never ever going to top that feeling. You know, you're never going to top that feeling of winning a European trophy like that in the fashion we did. But you know, the Europa League's a different, you know, it's a step up and it gets us Champions League football next year. So yeah, plenty of incentive on that front. In terms of, you know, the current squad we've got, you know, we've had quite a variety of good performers, maybe some unexpected performers along the way. Who's been your pick of the bunch so far? Because there's so many in contention for Hammer of the Year at the moment. It's probably the toughest year we've had of calling it. So who's kind of leading it for you at the moment?
Bowen. But the one that's impressed me the most is Emerson. This is the bar I've got. I expect Bowen to score or get an assist every game because I rate him that highly, and he doesn't achieve it, of course, because that would just be ridiculous. But I think he's been really consistent this season. Bowen has, and I still think he's our most important player. If people watching this think, no, it's this player, it's that player, I get it. You don't need to debate with me. I get it. I don't passionately care that much to argue my case here. But without Bowen, I think our chances of winning drops drastically. You know, we've seen us win games without Paqueta and Kudus with just Bowen. And because Bowen's always available, we don't know yet. But I wouldn't have the confidence of winning with just Paqueta out of those three. He'd have the supply there, but he's not got anyone to aim for, kind of thing. Whereas Kudus can be the star man, we know that, but we've not seen it yet because Bowen and Paqueta's available. So Jared Bowen being my Hammer of the Year, but Emerson's the one that I think has really kicked on from last season and is one of the first names on the team sheet now. And you know, at the start of the season, if you ask me what I'd like to see us do this summer in the transfer window, left back would have been quite a high priority. Now, I still think we need a left back, but what kind of left back in terms of the profile has changed drastically due to the form of Emerson. It's gone from like somebody to come in and play left back to somebody that can cover Emerson, or a young player that can maybe be good enough in a couple of seasons' time. So he's really changed how I view him as a player, but also the priorities in terms of shopping in the summer. So yeah, Bowen and Emerson would be my two, Frankie.
Yeah, no, Emerson definitely this season has been, he's been putting in consistent, solid performances, and as you mentioned, he wasn't brought in to be that new left back, long term situation. He was brought in at maybe third, fourth, fifth choice late in the summer transfer window, and then the first season he had, he struggled to kind of adapt. A lot of people said he couldn't play in a back four. He's not good enough defensively. Since that Conference League final, where Moyes put him in over Cresswell, he has not looked back at all. He's been absolutely outstanding. And yeah, on the Jared Bowen point, we saw it last year, when he was completely out of form and not scoring and not contributing in the final third, we completely struggled. We had absolutely no goal threat at all. It's a little bit different this year because of Kudus, but other than that, we don't really have another goal threat. So yeah, I think he, to call him our most important player is not wrong at all. For the reasons of we're just not going to score goals without him in the team. But yeah, that kind of segues us into the whole transfer strategy situation now with Tim Steidten. He's been here since July, August time of summer. A good amount of time to work with David Moyes now, who there's a lot of press that's gone out between those two, and maybe potential conflict in their approaches. Again, we've seen it in the January transfer window this year with Calvin Phillips signing and potentially maybe not being on the same page in terms of who they want to recruit as a first choice. What do you make as Tim Steidten and the project and the recruitment and the strategy and the analysts and everything that comes with Tim Steidten and what he's trying to do for this football club? What have you made of him so far in his opening 6-7 months at West Ham?
I love it. I love what he's trying to do. This is something I've wanted to see at West Ham for a while, and there's still things I'd like to see us improve on. I think when it comes to potentially selling players, I think we could do better at that. But that's something I'm hoping comes long term. He can't do everything at once. He's got to change it bit by bit, because essentially, you use the word culture there when we were talking about moving to the London Stadium in regards to the club as a whole. But Steiden's now trying to impact the sort of the culture of the way that we do transfers, the methods we do transfers. And Sullivan's been in football for a very, very long time. And he's got his way, and we know what it is. He's got his favourite agents and stuff. So Sullivan is almost having to sort of retrain himself as a football chairman. And that must be a very difficult thing to do when you've done something for decades. And now whether we think it's successful or not doesn't matter here, Frankie. Sullivan will think it's successful. He will think what he's been doing for decades works.
Yep.
And the results would suggest it does to some extent. He's, kept West Ham in the Premier League for a large period of time now. So it has worked to some extent. There's been elements of luck, and I think it's based more on punt than, whereas every transfer has a risk. But you get the feeling that with Sullivan's ones, there's a greater risk than there should be. Whereas with Steiden's one, that risk is lessened due to homework, because you're bringing players in that you're pretty confident will work. In terms of the data, it works, but it's just, can that player adapt to the Premier League? Can that player adapt to London? Can he get on with the manager? Can he get on with these TVs? That type of stuff isn't there. Numbers wise, Steidten knows exactly what players ticking all the boxes here, but the part which you can't really control, you can't really analyze until he's there, that's out of Steiden's hands a little bit. But what he can do is lessen the risk of the transfer not working for whatever reason. But Sullivan's got to change the way he goes about transfers, which it looks like he has done. It looks like he's taking a more hands-off approach, which, like I say, I don't think it's easy for him. If I know for sure, because if I was a chairman of a football club, I'd find it very difficult not to get involved in transfers. I would struggle. You're basically letting someone else play with your toy. You're okay. You can maybe do it for 5 minutes, but eventually you want that back. You've had enough now. That's mine, thank you. So credit to Sullivan for stepping away a little bit. In regards to what we're seeing from Steidten and Moyes, the articles that came out in the summer was unhelpful, but I also think a lot of it was untrue. And if they have a disagreement about who to sign, good. I want them to debate who to buy. I want them to discuss and even argue if they need to, as long as the conclusion they come to is one of agreement rather than just somebody throwing their weight around. There's different ways you can come to a conclusion as to which player to buy. But having people with different opinions over which player to go get is a healthy thing. in regards to just opening up your eyes a little bit. Like I said, Steidten, Mr. Data, he's probably got one way. We know Moyes is sort of Mr. Character, Mr. MOT test. Now, whether that works or not is a different debate, but we know Moyes likes to almost interview a player before committing to buying him. So actually, the combination of both, in theory, could be a really good thing to have. Buying loaning Calvin Phillips and buying one of Steidten's men, I think is a perfect combination in the January transfer window, truth be told. I think this is evidence. I think we had some evidence in the summer, and I think this window in particular is huge evidence, in my opinion, that it's working, because not only have they brought in sort of a Moyes one and a Steidten one, they've also shipped out Thilo Kehrer quick. Someone Moyes wasn't using, Steidten went to Monaco to get this deal done. So you've not only have you got the technical director and manager working to bring players in, you've actually got them working to get someone out. That's not something we've seen at West Ham. We usually just leave a player to rot, and their value depreciates dramatically.
Yep.
What was it? The 2nd of January, Frankie, or something like that? Kehrer was in France.
Yeah, it was
done like that. I like that. That's evidence that them two are working together, not only with players coming in, but also players going out. And I think that's crucial.
Yeah, no, I think they're on the same page. Like you mentioned, there's always going to be that initial conflict or disagreements over how things are working. You're coming into a setup where Moyes has been there for the past few years and got a lot of success. So you're going to have that conflict. You're going to have that disagreement.
It goes back to methods as well, Frankie. Moyes has never been data. Moyes has never been like, oh, let me Google, let me have a look at players over in this league and that league. Moyes is an old manager, because when he became manager, the way you would scout is you, the manager yourself, would go to a ground and watch them play football. I read Sam Allardyce's autobiography, and it was talking about how sometimes he'd go to a ground, watch the player, go in the manager's office after the game and do a deal there and then. And he'd drive off home knowing the deal was done. That was it. That was the scouting. Moyes is from the same era. So I speak about Sullivan having to retrain. Moyes is almost having to so Moyes' knowledge of players, and Moyes wants a centre midfielder. He's not going to have the same desire to identify one the same way Tim Steidten does. Steidten's like, let me have a look at my database. David Moyes is going to say, let me just use my knowledge. I know that player's a really good centre. Can I have him, please? And Steidten's sitting there going, no, actually, I think you should get this guy because his numbers say it's a really good deal. We know from his days in Everton, Moyes would sometimes watch a player 30 times before going and buying him. You can't do that now. Football moves too quick. But Moyes is having to get used to not watching a player 30 times before we bring in a player. It must be difficult for him as well. So actually, I think when it comes to identifying players, the way Moyes identifies players is completely different to the way Tim Steidten identifies players. And I think a combination of both is the right formula.
Yeah, I think as well, we in regards to David Sullivan, that if the debate at the moment is around Moyes and Steidten and how they're going to work, I haven't really heard David Sullivan's name mentioned in the past few months, which is obviously a positive for how we're trying to move forwards as a club, and like you mentioned, the culture and how we're trying to build the infrastructure behind the scenes. And to be fair to David Sullivan, he kind of tried that under Manuel Pellegrini. He allowed him to bring in a director of football in Huselos to kind of head up the transfers. Didn't work out. You look at the majority of those signings, just did not work at all. And we spent a lot of money. So, to be fair, he did try it. We then went back to Moyes. Moyes has, brought in some really good signings during his second stint. You look at Jared Bowen being one example. The Czech Republic boys. There's been a lot of very important and crucial signings. Jesse Lingard, another name I forgot to mention there. So I think now, like you mentioned, football's moving in a completely different way. And Tim Steiden's got that CV and he's got that resume and he's got the people around him to make that work. And, like you mentioned, shipping out Thilo Kehrer after, 2 days of the January transfer window. This guy is serious. He was jetting around in summer all over. He went to Brazil to try and get a deal done on the summer transfer window deadline day. He's a serious person. He wants to get the job done. He knows what he's looking for. Him and Moyes are pretty much on the same page now with what they want. And I now think Moyes trusts in him to do that as well. And I think there's also that mutual respect, like you mentioned with Phillips. Steiden's happy for Moyes to go ahead with that because it's what we need, and it's a good signing for a loan deal for what we need for this second half of the season. So, in terms of David Moyes, away from the transfers, on the pitch, it's the last question, Gio, of the day. It's something that's heavily debated and quite frankly very boring on Twitter at the moment around David Moyes, and people just seem to be unhappy with how we play, the style of play, despite the results that we've been getting. And, you know, people label it down to, okay, we've been quite lucky if you look at the expected stats. And last season, the signs were there in terms of the Premier League performance. What do you make of David Moyes and the whole situation at the moment? Because he's still out. He's going to be out of contract in the summer. There's still talks of whether that'll be renewed. What are your initial thoughts on the whole contract situation and the style of play as a fan watching?
I don't enjoy it, Frankie. When we first hired him, I didn't want him, but I understood why he came in as a firefighter. And when we didn't give him a new contract after he replaced Slaven Bilic, I was delighted. I was pleased to see him go. I didn't want to see him to stay. And I was pleased Pellegrini came in. I got that wrong. Pellegrini turned out to be crap. I think a large part of that was his loyalty to Roberto. But I was pleased to see Pellegrini come in. And if the football he played was okay. It was better. It was boring at times, and it was a little bit like possession for possession's sake. But I enjoyed it more than what I've seen under David Moyes. So when Pellegrini left and Moyes come back, I was fuming, Frankie. I didn't want it. I thought this is just 2 desperate days. Sullivan can't attract a manager, and Moyes can't get a new job. I thought this is a horrific situation we find ourselves in, that we've had to go back cap in hand to the guy we just told 18 months ago we didn't want, and we gave the new guy 100 million to spend. And the guy we're going back to had to take the job because no one had come in for him in the 18 months since. It was a horrible situation. But I was taken by surprise at how good the football was initially. We had that sort of tournament during COVID where we went on a nice run. Antonio scored 4 goals away to Norwich. Souček and Bowen were now here. They were both playing fantastically well. We stayed up comfortably. And we just kept winning. You know, went on to finish 6th in the league. But during that season, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. Jesse Lingard came in, and I thought that period with Lingard in the team, I was really enjoying that football where we had sort of prime finals in the team as well. I enjoyed it a lot. And I thought, I've been completely wrong about Moyes. This is what I want to see. But just slowly, I just got more and more tedious, more and more boring. And whenever there was a couple of bad results, it was like right back to basics, if you want, which is let's make sure we keep a tight defence. And when we finished 7th, the football tailed off, but the results remained enough because we had a really good start to the season, and the second half wasn't great. And we had the Europa League campaign, which gave you the impression that we lost points in the league because of the campaign. And we did in some games. I remember playing Chelsea and Brentford, I think it was, maybe where we rotated the team heavily in order to focus on Europa League. So we did concede some points, but the football was starting to get poor and the results were starting to become poor as well. And then we had the relegation battling season and the football was terrible. And when we come into the World Cup, I thought, please just get rid of this guy and get someone else in. We didn't. Then at one point, I thought, don't sack him because the alternative is Rafa Benitez. And I've never been at the point of anyone but Moyes, and I don't think I ever will get to that point. And then in the summer, I was hoping he would leave after the Conference League final. I was hoping, like, just go out on a high, right? Just go. You've won us a trophy. Fantastic. Go. You'll get a new Premier League job because you're going out with that on your CV. And we can go get a new manager. Got Europa League football to offer the new manager. So we're in a good position now. And he's here. So I tried to push the reset button in the summer, Frankie, when it was obvious he wasn't going anywhere. I thought, listen, let's just try and judge him now. No Rice. It's a new era for West Ham. 100 million player left. We've got plenty of money to spend. Caduceus come in. Souček shackles have gone now. He's at Arsenal. So let's see what we've got. And at times, listen, the football's better this season than it was last season, right? There's been some really horrific games, which is probably similar to last season, but by and large, I think the football's improved. And there's been some games I've enjoyed it this season. It's not like I've hated all of them. There's been some games I've come away thinking I enjoyed watching that. Brighton away, loved it, absolutely loved it. But there's also been some games I've hated. There's been some games I've sat in. There's a couple of games, Frankie, I nodded off. Like coming up to, I was like, oh, hang on a minute. You know, granted, it's because I'm sat comfy on my sofa, but Olympiacos at home was one of them. I remember watching it, just like, this is boring. This is terrible. We've got the ball and we don't know what to do with it. There's no idea. And at this point, I don't want him to get a new contract, but I don't want the club to decide yet. Just have an open mind and let him play out the season. Because if we finish sixth or we win the trophy, it's very difficult not to say to give him a new deal. Regardless of, listen, if we win every game 1-0 and win the Europa League, I will be buzzing. I'm not going to sit here. I didn't really enjoy it. I'll love it. We've won the Europa League. I will love it, regardless of how we get there. I find Moyes, for me, when we're winning games and we're picking up points, I can sort of stomach it because the results justify how we play. But as soon as we stop winning, it becomes a massive issue because you need the entertainment factor and it's not there. And there's been sometimes we've won games where I do feel like we've been a bit lucky or I've not enjoyed the performance. But like I said, we won. It sort of justifies what he's done. I don't like it, but Moyes says it's worked. I'm like, well, I guess it has.
Yeah.
So at this point, I don't want him to get a new contract. I don't enjoy the football, but I enjoy the results.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough to argue against the results that he's got, which is probably why there's so much conflict in the fan base around Moyes. And like you mentioned, it really does change from game to game. We'll get a result like Arsenal away. People say Moyes masterclass. This is why he does the approach he does. We'll then also go to Fulham, a couple of weeks before that and lose 5-0, and it's like, oh, like is this it? Is this really it? I think what's more frustrating for me is that I think we have the players to play in a more aggressive way. If Moyes was a bit braver in how he decided to play, and I think the fact that he kind of his president is, we don't concede, we don't get beat. A draw in certain games is a good result. Just make sure you get that point. But defensively, we've actually been pretty bad this season. We've leaked a lot of goals. We haven't kept that many clean sheets. I know we had that good turn of form in December, but by and large, we haven't been great defensively. And I think that's the biggest issue most people are now having is that the football hasn't been very entertaining. COVID lockdown season and the season after, it was electric. The football we were playing was not like the football we're playing now. We had that counter-attacking threat. Jared Bowen, Antonio, Jesse Lingard, Fornals, like you mentioned, all these players were thriving in that kind of setup. And we were scoring 3 goals in pretty much every game in the second half of the season. I remember we went 3-0 up against Arsenal. We ended up drawing 3-3. We beat Leicester at home 3-2 as well. We went away to Leicester and won 3-0 that season. We had so many good results. This season, we've still had those good results. Like you think of the Chelsea game, the Brighton game is probably maybe an exception. The Arsenal game, Newcastle drawing at home 2-2. We've had some pretty solid results. Beating Man United, they weren't particularly entertaining matches. If you kind of look back at it, other than Brighton, really, it hasn't been that entertaining. Beating Man United, people weren't that impressed. They said, okay, you should be beating that type of Man United team, and the fact that we struggled to beat them was a negative. So I think Moyes is now in a position where he's basically a victim of his own success and what he's now set as the standard. I think this is probably as high as he'll ever take West Ham. And this is probably his last chance now to win that Europa League. I don't think he'll get that contract in the summer. I don't particularly want him to, but I wouldn't be opposed to it because of the performances and the results, that we've been picking up and the position we're in. If you're a fan looking outside at West Ham at the moment, 6th in the league, through to Europa League knockout stages, why would you not want to keep Moyes, forever for what he's done? There's a lot of bigger issues than that. It goes a lot more deeper than what people look on the outside. So I think with Tim Steidten, they'll have a list. They'll have a list in the background, that they're probably working on or have in reserve to move forwards with in the summer if he doesn't get that new contract. I have no doubt that Tim Steidten will be able to appoint a manager that is right for this football club and someone maybe he sees as more of a long-term gain than David Moyes currently is, who's been at the club, 4 years now, which is a pretty long time for a manager to be at a football club. He's probably one of the most, the highest Premier League managers at the moment in terms of endurance. So I'm in the same camp as you. I can't get behind Moyes enough to say, okay, I really want him to get a new contract just because of the type of football we've played and whether I think it's sustainable enough. No, I don't. We'll see. I could eat my words in a few months' time when we finish in a European spot and we do really well in Europa League as well. But it's so tight there. And I think, people are going to just keep switching. And I just don't think it's fair on Moyes either, to be honest. The amount of success he's got at West Ham and it's still by and large quite discredited by the fan base, despite what he's kind of achieved in that last few years for us. So I also understand that point where, like we mentioned at the very start of this video, success to us was finishing and competing for a European spot and maybe winning a trophy. Well, Moyes has done that for 3 or 4 seasons now consecutively after avoiding relegation, which is what he was brought in to do. So it's hard to argue against it, but yeah, I mean, final thoughts, Gio, before we wrap up. It's been quite a long one, but yeah, final thoughts on the whole situation.
I always say, and I stand by this, if we were to replace Moyes in the summer, finding a new manager that plays better football than David Moyes is not difficult. We'd be able to find one easy enough. Finding a manager that can bring the same results as David Moyes today, right? If the season finished today, let's just say we got to the quarterfinals of the Europa League and got eliminated, but we finished 6th in the Premier League, right? That's how the season finishes. Finding a manager that can replicate those results will be difficult. Finding a manager that can do both, play better football and bring the results that Moyes has, I think that's a very difficult job. Like I said, I'm under no illusions we can get someone in that sees us play better football, but I'm not confident that that man, whoever he may be, will also bring the results success that Moyes has brought. So it's a difficult appointment. You believe Steidten will be involved in hiring the new manager should Moyes go? I don't. I've spoke about Sullivan having to change his way. I see there's no evidence yet that Steidten will employ the new manager because we've not had the situation yet.
Yeah.
But while the Moyes thing was rumbling on, is he getting a new deal? Is he not getting a new deal? And there was some talk he was going to get one, or there's going to be talks. The one person that didn't have any news, which I found interesting, weirdly enough, was Fabrizio Romano, because it's quite obvious his source is Tim Steidten, because when Tim Steidten came to West Ham, Romano broke the name of Steidten. People told him he was wrong, and he said, "No, I'm not. It's done." And people said, you're getting ahead of yourself. It's not done. And Romano said, "It's done." A week later, it was announced. Basically, and a week later, Fabrizio said, "It's signed now. It'll be announced soon." And everyone still said, "No, it's not." And it got announced. He was bang on. Romano was bang on. Caduce was on the jet with Tim Steidten, who had the photo of Fabrizio Romano. There's only a handful of people with that photo for the start, right? So for Romano to get it, he's got it from someone on that jet. It's Steidten. And the reason we know it's Steidten is because when he tweeted the picture, he did not mention Caduce's agent, Jen, and she publicly called him out for it. So we now know Jen's not the one that sent Tim Steidten that photo. So there's only one person left. Well, there's two, Caduce and Steidten. It's probably Tim Steidten. So we can accept, or you can believe me for a minute, that Tim Steidten and Fabrizio Romano are friends. Let's just call it that. When all the Moyes stuff came out, there was nothing from Fabrizio Romano, which suggests he doesn't know, which would suggest Tim Steidten hasn't told him anything. So why is Tim Steidten? I'm probably grasping at straws here.
Yeah.
But maybe, just maybe, it's not Steidten's bag. Maybe Steidten's brought in to do the transfers, because on the same level in terms of hierarchy at the club, we've got Martin Noble. One's technical director, one's sporting director, but they've got the same job. They've got the same level of authority at the football club, and above them, we know who we've got. We've got the likes of Karen Brady and David Sullivan. But we know Martin Noble's a big fan of David Moyes, or he has been anyway. He's been a huge fan of Moyes. I'm just not convinced that if Moyes goes, Steidten's the one that has the responsibility to go get a new manager. I think he'll have a say. I think he'll be involved in discussions. He might even lead the negotiations on who we identify, because he's done that with all the transfers so far, including Kerr, which I like. But will he get complete control? I'm not convinced. I still think Moyes gets offered a new contract. I don't want it before someone misquotes me, but at this point, I think he gets it. I just hope he doesn't get it soon, because there's that danger that he can sign it now and we finish 10th in the league and we're out the next round of the Europa League. And suddenly it's an unsuccessful season and you've just committed to this manager for the next 2 years, and actually it's possibly the wrong thing to do. I think if he does get a contract offer, regardless of whether they want to or not, I strongly believe it should be dependent on results at the end of the season, because the entertainment factor isn't why you keep David Moyes, it's results. So if you're going to keep him for results, then let's make sure he earns it via results, because he ain't earning it via entertainment.
Yeah, no, definitely. We can't shoot the gun too early on that one, because like we mentioned near the beginning, there's only a few points between us and 11th place. So things can change very quickly. And yeah, with David Sullivan and the manager situation, he's going to be involved. He's going to want to be involved. But David Sullivan's never paid out a manager. It's going to be, if it is going to be a hire, if he doesn't choose Moyes, if it goes with David Sullivan, he's going to opt for someone that's available, that isn't in a job, or it's someone that's just been sacked or whatever. Tim Steidten won't want to do that. I think Tim Steiden's now set a precedent at West Ham in terms of what to expect. Like we're saying, with that culture, there's been a shift. There's been an evident shift, not just internally but externally with the fans, and on social media, it's quite big now in terms of what impact he's doing. And even with Fabrizio Romano, like you're saying there, those links that they have. Tim Steiden's a big player. He's come from Leverkusen. He's worked some really good transfers over there. He's headed up. I think he was involved in the Xabi Alonso appointment as well. So he's a big player. He's a big player, and I think we would be. I think David Sullivan would be naive or stupid not to include him in that hiring process. It's whether he wants to go through with that and relinquish a bit of that control. That remains to be seen. But yeah, Moyes might stay on. I agree with you as well. I think if we do it too early with the contract, we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot, because things can change very quickly. But if he does get the results and we have a successful season, you can't argue against him earning that contract extension. So yeah, Gio, massively thank you for coming onto the channel. Great to have your thoughts on the West Ham situation, and let us know in the comments what you guys think of the whole situation of what we discussed. And if you aren't aware of Hammers Chat and what Gio does over there, I'll leave a link in the description, but I'm sure you're all aware. And yeah, Gio, good to have you on. We'll catch up again soon. And yeah, thank you for everyone for watching. If you've made it this far, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and subscribe to Hammers Chat as well while you're there. And yeah, see you on the next one.